So here is a visual diary. I hope that the camera doesn't die before, or any of the lights die before I finish. Okay, hello. Okay, anyway.
So, I went to art school and I started hating art. It's ironic because the sole purpose of me enrolling in an art school was that so I'd have an urge to make more art. But the second that pressure started rolling in, all of a sudden, I started hating it. I suddenly hated the idea of making art in the first place. Even writing or filming this feels a bit like a chore because to me this is just a means to satisfy a deadline or a portfolio to film, and for sure if I were to edit this I would put some sort of ADHD supplementary over here, maybe some Subway Surfers at the bottom, because a lot of the time it just isn't enough anymore. Well, I can't really complain either way because I can have two monitors and still end up using my phone. So anyway, I remember back in senior high school when I was asking my ates and kuyas who went to art school if I should go to art school, and a good 80% of them responded with a resounding no. Because to them, when they took art school, it ended up killing their passions. And of course, I did not listen to them because for me, I was like, it's different. I have a purpose and I have a reason for going to art school. Whenever I think back at that conversation, it always feels like I get slapped in the face with an "I told you so." But it was true, I did have a purpose to going into art school, and it was because I loved making stories. I still do, actually. It's in the back of my brain and I don't even realize it when it's 3 a.m. and I've been running on 4 hours of sleep and my mind is just wide awake with all of these images that continue to get built and stack onto my brain with every new word that gets written down. And there's this euphoric feeling of going back into writing that you've written and reading it all and seeing that it just now exists, that you've suddenly breathed something into existence. In a way, it makes me feel closer to God whenever I write, because something that was once nothing was suddenly written into existence. And then there's just suddenly this whole universe that was birthed from the confines of my mind, and this world consists of multiple people with interesting backstories, and the world consists of maybe magic, or it's born of a dystopia, and there's just these so many quirks and things that revolve around it, and it's beautiful. And there's just this blissful joy in creating, and at its purest, creating these things has been nothing but wonderful. But then I started going to art school. In my head, the concept of it was so appealing because it was a place where I could be rewarded for my creativity. I saw it as a good motivator. It was a place that could provide some sort of structure and this healthy pressure in my day-to-day life so that I'd have something to do. I'd be forced to have some sort of structure in my day-to-day life, and I would therefore have much more to show for. The stories I plan to do are suddenly put in the forefront in comparison to if I had taken a different course where my art would then be put as a subsection or as a leisure rather than as the focal point of my passions. I'd then have more liberty to take action in my day-to-day doing of my workflow. I wouldn't have to save art for the weekend, but at least here it's encouraged to create as much as you can. And I think that's exactly what it is. It's because I had to create as much as I could. I think being a pandemic baby didn't really help either, because my first 2 years of art school were spent in the confines of my room, and online learning, as much as it's a great modality, isn't exactly the best form of learning I've come to learn. Having spent 3 years in my room without any social interaction, I felt like I was just in my own little bubble of security, and security tends to lead to stagnation. Contrary to popular opinion, or I don't know if it's popular or contrary at all, I think that pressure is good. I think that it's good to feel like you have a lot to catch up on, because then there's this force that drives you to work. This gives you this mindset that's more oriented on growth rather than something that's innate in talent. Because prior to entering art school, that was my fear. I felt like I wasn't good enough for art school. So I had this pressure that forced me into many late nights of studying art fundamentals and script writing and art lessons. And all of this pressure to just keep getting good and keep getting better and to keep raising the bar higher. And I loved it. I loved the pressure that came with it because I was genuinely doing something that I enjoyed and I loved. Even if that pressure existed, it was something that I could power through. And though that's not to say that there weren't any burnout episodes, but for the most part, whenever I would do art, I did it for the sake of it. There was this naive and unadulterated joy that came with creating, and my soul felt like it was where it was at. Then I was more or less shocked to figure out that art school wasn't exactly what I had expected it to be. Well, maybe it was, but my mindset might have changed as soon as I committed to it. See, maybe there was a shift in my brain that now I was on my way to becoming a full-blown artist. Suddenly, it was all real to me. That this is who I was becoming, and this was what I was going to do, and this was what I was going to keep doing for the rest of my life. I get to write stories, and I get to illustrate, and I get to film, and I get to keep branding myself, and I get to market myself. So why does none of that sound appealing? The more and more I sunk my teeth into making art under a deadline, the more and more I grew numb to the excitement that came with creating it in the first place. Which felt jarring when the thought that echoes in the back of my mind was that I chose this. I had to be happy, because after all, I now had the freedom and the time to make art in comparison to back then when I had none of these things that I have now. But that love for art slowly started to wither away as the sands of time slipped through my fingers. I initially attributed it to burnout, but then it just became an overall nothingness. Okay, this is the part about pressure that I talked about applies. I'm just gonna read this from my script because part of it might have been that my initial classmates during my first year, they all seemed a bit underqualified for art school as well, not in a demeaning way though. My thoughts about art school were that everybody was leagues above me and I would have to strive and I would have to fight to have my place in this school, and so that I would have to prove my worth constantly and consecutively. But then I figured out that that wasn't exactly true. It seemed like everybody was figuring out their place just like I was. Everybody was just learning. We were all going to art school to get better, and nobody in my class was exactly this art god that I had envisioned at the onset. So this eased the pressure, I suppose, and this ease of pressure created this stagnation and a slow decline, and before I knew it, I started to accredit my art to just deadlines in comparison to back then. I suddenly started to accredit my art to just deadlines, and I didn't bother working outside of that. That the deadline was enough. That art was just a deadline. And then as the days and the nights passed, suddenly my schedule of working late nights for the purpose of creating art, whether it's for love or whether because I wanted to study it, suddenly dissolved into other forms of entertainment and non-art related hobbies because art was now my 9 to 5 instead of being my midnight oil. So suddenly, here I am, with all these ideas brewing in my mind, but with my creativity being redirected to other forms of art, such as my projects or such as my deadlines. Or even when I'd make art for the sake of it, it'd never have this pure intention anymore, because in the back of my mind, I would always think that I would be doing it for my portfolio, or I would stop myself midway because this just isn't marketable enough. This is not going to appeal to the mass media, and it's not going to gain traction if I were to post it. So let's just not do it in the first place. I'd get so caught up in the structure that I would forget about the joy of creating art in the first place. Art as business is not the same as art for fun. Truly, I think that's what everybody was trying to tell me now. There's just this underlying voice of never being good enough for the industry, or how nobody would want to take the time to consume or to buy or to look even at your art. The bottom line of it is that if I continue to make, I continue to have some purpose of sorts. However, this isn't to say that I'm not grateful for the opportunity of being able to go into art school. I know that a lot of people dream of it and aren't able to do so, and I was given the privilege of being able to follow and take up a course that I was truly passionate about rather than something that's more traditionally secure and works better. I took up the arts because I loved making stories, but I felt like I have so many regrets if I didn't take it in the first place. I feel like I'd be abandoning a very significant and huge part of myself by depriving myself of that risk of taking up the arts, despite it not being known as the most lucrative career choice. Though actually, I have learned now that I am an art student that the arts is actually a very good career if you know how to market yourself well. The highlighted there is if you know how to market yourself well, if you know how to run business as well as make art, it makes a lot. But you need to know how to do both, otherwise it's just not gonna work. What's more devastating to me is the loss of passion that came with it. Something good turned bad by the reality of needing to make more art for the sake of money, or in my case, projects, deadlines, rather than just for the simple pleasure of doing it in the first place. Nevertheless, I can never really seem to find myself fully escaping the arts, even if I've come to loathe it. The spirit of art exists in me nonetheless. I'm like a moth drawn to a flame, or like more accurately, maybe like a hopeless lover where art is just like banging on my door 3 a.m. in the morning, waking me up out of my deep slumber and yelling at the top of its lungs, "I'm here! Let me in! I'm right here! You can't escape me! You can't leave me!" The continuous desire to keep trying to create never seems to disappear. It just starts to blend into the chaos of work and money, but at its core, art is just purely a sense of expression and freedom. When art is a career, it becomes difficult to distinguish when it's leisure or when it's work. Sometimes you can gaslight yourself when you're doing work and say, "I'm enjoying this so much," but girl, you do not. Your posture sucks. You have not gone out. You are not eating properly. You are deteriorating and you are rotting. Or maybe you can be doing it for fun, but the back of your mind is like, you're not actually doing this for fun. You're doing it because you have a portfolio that's still missing and it's still empty and you're just trying to find a means to fill it. But I guess like any relationship, the distinction has to be made in order for it to keep functioning and to be healthy and to keep working. So maybe art really is just like dealing with a stubborn lover. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's all sunshine and butterflies and you're holding hands and it's your honeymoon and it's just the time of your life. You're making so much, you're doing so many things, and then all of a sudden it's just like a shift in gears and then it's unbearably frustrating. You're yelling at each other, "Why is this not working out? Why aren't you cooperating with me? I'm just trying to get things done, but you're stopping me. What is wrong with you? I just want to..." But at the end of the day, you return over and over and over again, because no matter how infuriating this process can be, it's all you've known and it's what you love. And in a way, I think that's how it's meant to be. So anyway, thank you for watching my video. I don't know if I will keep doing things like these. I must have had like what was initially supposed to be just one take, because I have actually read the script out loud like 4 or 5 times already, which takes about 30 minutes per turn. It ends up dragging on so long because there's suddenly a complication with the camera, there's suddenly a complication with the mic, there's a complication with the lights, and yep, it just never ends up getting done. So I hope that this is actually my last take. I love art still. I enjoyed making this, or maybe I can just keep gaslighting myself into thinking that I did. Anyway, that's all for now. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.